So I'm really excited to be here. I'm Larry Lenhart. I work with a company called HotChalk. And if we could, Lucas, you got it going? Oh, no worries. Actually, I could talk through this slide, but it wouldn't last long. So we're getting there. So I work with HotChalk. I'm the CEO of HotChalk. For many of you who have known HotChalk over time, our company's been in place, or actually it's been a company for 9 years. And Ed Fields is the founder of the company. He's a really good friend of mine. And we have worked together for probably 6 or 7 years. Myself as investor, he is the CEO. And about 6 months ago, I became the CEO working with Ed, so he still belongs with the company, he's still involved. Just in case you came here to see Edward and he's not here. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about HotChalk. And it's not so much I want to talk about HotChalk. I'd like to talk a little bit more briefly about HotChalk, but a lot about the industry, some of the major transformational waves we're seeing, and then some of the challenges we're seeing in our partner schools, how we address them from a HotChalk perspective. And then obviously at the end, I'll show a video because we've got to show a video at the very end. So HotChalk, very briefly, we are a 9-year-old company. We've been in the market of online education. We have learned a ton. We've learned a lot of good things and a lot of bad things. And actually, we kind of drink from our own medicine. We're a lifelong learning company, so we actually learn ourselves as a company. We have 300 people. We've graduated about 20,000 students, almost all of those graduate students. We do that through our partners. We take graduate programs from our partners and we put them online. And we actually market those programs. We find the students, we enroll the students, we manage those students through the process with our student services. We have adjunct faculty that work in partnership with the faculty of the schools that we work with. And our focus there is obviously the premier quality. We graduate a little bit over 80% of all students that go through the program itself. And from the perspective of managing that and driving that is our data analytics platform. We spent a lot of time on that platform. We're actually investing quite a bit in that platform. We've also purchased not too long ago a branding agency called CCA. And if you think about marketing to students and of the programs in colleges and universities, the better the brand, the more attractive it is to the students, the more students you can get on board, and the more students you can educate. We also have an organization within HotChalk called Student Resources, and there are B2B channels. So we have, from a part-time organization, about 2,000, 2,500 people that are out in the market working with both employers for looking at jobs for our graduates or our school's graduates, but also to look for new folks that come into our programs. So I want to talk a little bit about the transformational waves. When we look at market opportunities, we certainly look at what happens in healthcare, but we actually look broader than healthcare. We have been in business for 9 years. We're a private company, so we're not out watching what's going on in the market, although we think that's important from that perspective. We have very long-term investors. Moore Davidoff Ventures is an investor, Bertelsmann's an investor, and others, and we think very long-term. We want to do what's right for the student. We believe every mind matters, but we're also out there to look at what's happening in the market outside of education, because what really happens out in that market is what we hopefully can impact. So if you think about the market, skip back from education, although I'll touch base on education. In 1209, Cambridge was founded. In 1636, Harvard was founded. There were 3 other colonial schools in the US before 1750, William and Mary, Princeton, and Yale. That's 1750, and those were generations ago. But the school categorization of how we taught was set up then. Right? And back then, a big transformational shift might have taken 50 to 75 years. Think about the average life expectancy of 37. Well, I'd personally be dead right now if that's the case, so I'm going to go from there. But that perspective of what the learning process was, one job, one career, this is what we do, it's changed dramatically. It's changed dramatically over time. Life expectancy has improved. But just in the last 15 years, the changes have been enormous, as we all know. And it's not so much in helping the student learn how to learn. It's also helping the colleges and universities learn how to teach. Okay? It's a dual focus from that perspective. And if you think about, if we step back and when Isaac Newton talked about the laws of, one of the laws, and one of his favorite laws was any object at rest or any object at motion without an external impetus would remain in that categorization into infinity. And that actually may have happened a long time ago, right? You learned, you stayed in that job, everything's all good, life is good. But all we're seeing now is external stimulation. We're changing, and changing. And not only are we changing a lot, but the actual velocity of the change is increasing. So we have to learn, and we have to learn how to learn faster. Right? The scary part about all of that is, if you think about what happens beyond, we talk a lot about, in this conference, we talk a lot about educating folks to get a job. One of the concerns that we have when we think about our strategy is what happens after the job. In the US in 2025, 90 million people will be over the age of 65. In China, over 350 million people will be over the age of 65. And the fascinating thing is, by then, the average life expectancy will be at 90 to 100 years. So we've got 30 years of 400 million people that are not learning as we speak today. So we've got to take that learning to learn beyond the programs, beyond the graduate degrees, beyond the job, and into lifelong learning. And then finally, if we look at and categorize all these trends from that perspective, we can see that we're actually, the change of workforce skills increasing, the percentage of employees, the length of a job is decreasing, the amount of spend that the employees are spending is actually decreasing on jobs from that perspective and on training. And we're right in this challenging environment right now. And this environment is not just affecting the students, it's affecting, in the US and globally, communities. Right? It's affecting different demographics of lives. It's changing the health of people because either they live in an area where the jobs are gone and they're not re-educating and they're not learning, or there are areas where never was. So when we think about what we can do at HotChalk, it's certainly the student, but it's also, we want to save both communities that then can deliver and work with those students over time, because we believe every mind does matter. A couple of the opportunities that we see in the market that we've learned a lot from our partners that I want to talk about very quickly. The student experience, which we talk sometimes as student as a customer, sometimes as student. Talk about branding and how important that is. Talk about data analytics and having that open analytics and the importance of that. Lifelong learning and actually the teaching from a life perspective. So if you think about the student, and obviously you can tell we have a branding agency because they create the panels and the slides so that I keep a lot of the bullet points off, just for all of you from that perspective. The student in today's world, and we call them a customer, is really having a tough time, as we all know. We have tons of SIS systems going on. We got finance, we got HR, we got transportation, all the systems, and the students out there trying to interact with that perspective, and they're trying to learn from it. And what happens is the student is actually extraordinarily sharp and extraordinarily quick and would like to help manage their own data, and they like to actually take that data, if possible, and use it to make themselves better. Right? But colleges and universities have to be very smart about it. Colleges and universities have somewhat of a soft underbelly with data because they gather so much of the data, it takes a little time to turn it into information, but yet securitizing that data, making sure it's private and without doing advertising associated with that with the student has been a challenge that we've seen in some of our partners. Right? So some of that actually comes back and reflects negatively on the student, and then the student closes up on the data and doesn't want that data shared. They don't benefit from it. The employees don't benefit from it. From the data itself, there's a tremendous amount of information out there being captured across the board from that perspective. From the student's perspective, we see that if we can use that data in a way that helps, terrific. So like I mentioned before, we have a data analytics platform that's extraordinarily strong. We can understand literally what happens in a student's journey when they join. Good example is we have seen, let me step back. When you think about folks that drop out of school, the number one reason they drop out of school happens to be financial support. And the number two is a family issue. It could be a health issue. It could be anything. And in the graduate programs, it typically ends up being a family-based issue. When we look at a student's journey on an online program, we will know almost immediately if they have a family issue. We apply the data analytics. We can understand how fast certain folks are doing, working, repeating, et cetera. And our student services teams get red issue alerts if we see an issue. Then that person calls the student and helps them address that issue. It's a personal relationship. It's a great experience for the student. We help both from a financial aspect. If it's other issues, we help manage that. We may delay the program for them. We're there to take care of them from that perspective. And that's critically important. The faster you capture that, the better off everybody is. Another example from understanding from the data analytics side is we have a school in Midwest, and they have an MBA program. And the typical folks come in about 2 years after college. They've been out working for a couple years. They come online, take the MBA degree. And we found that the graduation rates were declining from the MBA degree. And we were concerned. We ran the data, looked at all the analytics, and what we realized is for anybody that joined 2.5 years after their undergrad, really had a hard time with the program. Then we dissected the programs and tried to figure out, okay, who was involved in which class, when, and we realized that the way the MBA was loaded with the classes, 2 of the hardest classes were up front that involved a lot of interaction. But the students that have been gone for 2.5 years out of school, they kind of forgot a little bit about the structured discipline of learning. So we went back with the school, we rearranged those programs, we changed it a little bit, and those graduation rates went through the roof. So using that data to help the student, to help the school, and to help the environment is absolutely critical. From a preparedness perspective, there is a dichotomy in a little differential in how people think they're supported. And this is probably no new news to everybody in the room, but there's a reason why I want to highlight it from that perspective. From employers' perceptions, let me step back. If you talk to the provosts feel in general, 90% of their students are ready for the job. Right? And that's terrific. That's kind of the job from the provost. If you ask the employers, was that student ready for the job? Only 40%, and that number's coming down. And the students, they're sort of in the middle. They get to the job and they go, daggone, I wasn't ready for this. And so the question is, how do we make sure they're prepared for it? How do we make sure they're prepared for that job? And how do we do it properly? And that involves a number of different things. It involves making sure that when they take on that graduate degree, that if there's holes in that discipline and knowledge, we help. It also involves working with the jobs, the employers, to help them backfill, teach them, et cetera. A couple of examples. We have a Master's of Education program with NYU, and it's kind of embedded program where we actually work with the school districts, and the school districts take on the students. They want them as teachers, and they're going to educate them to get their master's because they want them to go on in leadership roles in the schools. One of the schools is in the center of a city, and we went to visit the school in preparing for it. And in the classroom that we went into, there was one class, and they had one seat, and it was blue. And there were blue flowers on it, and no one sat in that. So we talked to the teacher. We said, help us understand what happened, because that chair was Susan's chair, and she died. She got shot. And that's not untypical in many of the center city schools. But what we realized, and we went back to NYU, is we have to teach those teachers coming into that area about trauma. So we put a trauma program in place before they went out on the job so that they were ready for that job. And those are the things that we absolutely need to start doing from that perspective and helping them understand that. We actually have a lot of folks coming out of some of our programs. We realized that their writing was not up to snuff, so we actually created a writing program. So they actually take a writing program at the very last section of their graduate degree, increase their writing skills. That worked really well. It worked so well, we moved it to the beginning of the degree program, and that actually helped the entire graduate program. So making sure that we have that providing view from the external perspective, preparing the folks for the jobs, and making sure we have that interaction from that perspective. From a brand perspective, this year blew my mind at UCLA. 100,000 people applied for undergraduate at UCLA. Record-breaking. UCLA has a strong brand. All the folks with a strong brand, applications through the roof, going crazy, et cetera. The other folks are having a tough time. I did the school tour with my son. It was really hard to tell some of the schools because we were on a road trip like 2 schools a day. At the end of the week, you're like, I could barely remember the difference between some of those schools. Brand does matter. And our brand organization, our brand team is just through the roof. They are so busy, it's absolutely unbelievable. A lot of the work they're doing is on enrollment and branding, and the 2 things they focus the most on, number 1, with that school, make sure that they take it and show the differential on-campus learning environment compared to the competitors. And number two, that school is preparing for a well-rounded education beyond the campus, embracing all aspects. And those two things are making a difference for those schools as well. So brand absolutely does matter. And lastly, lifelong learning. And this is the most important thing from that perspective. The journey does not begin when you look for the student. The journey does not begin when you educate the student, and the journey doesn't end when you finish. We learned, very interestingly, how important this is because we actually go and find the students, and our enrollment specialists, we actually get to know them. I mean, they're making a decision like buying a car. It's a graduate degree. It's expensive, and we actually want to make sure that they get a huge return from it. But it becomes a relationship that we develop with them. And then we take them through student services with our schools, and then they graduate, and we kind of say, okay, thanks a lot, good luck. We worked with our schools, and we're saying, guys, look, we need to maintain that relationship all the way through their graduate degree into their job, and then on into retirement. But actually, let's take that data, and let's start in the very beginning. Because if we can identify the best applicants for that program, then the more applicants will actually graduate, and the more applicants that actually go on to useful programs, and then by useful jobs, and therefore then the more folks that have the jobs will come back and ask for more of those people, and at some point they will actually start sponsoring some of those folks. So our team with SRUSA is working with a lot of hospitals. From a nursing program, very difficult to graduate enough nurses that are qualified. Their turnover on nursing is crazy right now. And from those hospitals, they would love to find good nurses in a routine mechanism from a useful perspective. So we want to make sure we get those folks from the hospitals into a hiring pattern from our partner schools. And then we actually help them, the hospitals, continue to graduate and educate, not graduate, they already graduated, educate those nurses. Because we're seeing that the aging population is taking a lot of home care into the home. We're taking a lot of the healthcare jobs out of the hospital if we can, and putting them into remote areas so we can get to more people. This is, as a society, get them to more people. And those folks have to be trained differently as they are today. And so we want to make sure that those hospitals are ready to do that, and that they're ready to work out and give feedback on the graduate program that we have. So lifelong learning, absolutely critical from that perspective, not just from the graduate degree, but finding the student and maintaining that relationship. We work with our partners. We believe they have a unique brand and relationship with the student, and we want them to have that brand and relationship going on into their lifetime learning, because we will typically trust the organization where we did our graduate degree or undergraduate degree. So we have 300 people. Our organization, we have tenure, we have many, many people that have been there all 9 years. The average person in our organization has been there 3.5 to 4 years. Personally, I've been involved for 7 years. But our belief, and we have strong values from that perspective, we believe in the transformable power of lifelong learning through innovation, data-driven solutions to our partner schools, the students we serve, because we believe that every mind matters. And we believe that everything we can do for the mind and for society is a really good deal. So I do have one quick video to show you. If you don't mind queuing that up real quick.
It is time the world thinks bigger.
We touch other people's lives simply by existing.
It is about a journey through life where you create value.
A world in which uncertainty rules. It's a great time to innovate and a great time to do great things.
Are we alone in the universe? What is the future of the human race?
Push the envelope and provide a reason for people to be excited and inspired to be human.
Because doing what's never been done before is intellectually seductive.
The yearning to do what we do in the service of something larger than ourselves.
We're seemingly capable of anything.
We do have the capacity to turn our lives into a work of art.
You don't define yourself in terms of what you've done before, but in terms of what you're doing now.
We truly are living in an extraordinary time.
It's education that's meant to take us into this future that we can't grasp.
To say we can do this maybe better than anyone else, that gives us a great chance to influence the future.
When that is gone, that'll be the beginning of a civilized world.
As they said in the film, Back to the Future, where we're going, we don't need roads.
We're not good at everything. We're not good by ourselves. But if you go out as a group, we're pretty damn amazing.
Thank you. Anybody have any questions? A couple minutes remaining? Yes, please.
You talked about providing students with the partners and programs you work with. I don't have to scream? Okay. Can you go over how you recruit these students, how you find these students, and then how you choose which of your partners to market to them? That's part one. And then part two, I know age-old question, but how do you make sure these students are completing their programs? I know there's data and they're getting calls, but that's not very scalable, everyone getting a call. So two parts, recruitment and completion.
Yeah, okay, so first on the recruitment perspective, so for each of our partner schools, we have channels, sales channels or business development channels. So we'll have our own B2B people. It might be in a region, it might be by that location. And we will spend the marketing dollars focused going after the student to join that program, but it'll be specific to that program. And it's not super complicated to do using some of the approaches from a marketing standpoint. And the B2B channels are all done based on a program itself. Every once in a while, we'll see, we'll see where one program may pop up in another area from an SEO or something else, and we'll modify it and change that. But there's been no issues from that perspective. The other was how do we make sure the folks graduate or get through that process? Sure. No, we have the data analytics that we actually watch the students throughout the entire process. So we actually see how they're doing on almost a daily basis. And if they do have a challenge, we can actually reach out to them and solve that challenge. We know when they finish. We know when they finish a class. We know when they finish the next class. And we know when they finish that degree. And our objective and our mantra is we're shooting for well over 80% from that graduation perspective rate. And our partner schools are involved in that entire process. Other questions? Thank you for the time.